Luca, if
Hello everyone.
hello.
Let me share my screen. Can you see my slides?
Yes, but we also see the small slides on the side. So
Oh, it's in presenter mode. Wait. Let me unshare. Just a second. And then now it should be better, right?
that's good. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks.
Ed.
So first of all, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to give this talk about exoplanetary atmospheres. And it is a super short and super condensed review. So let's start with a bit of physics and how atmospheric escape happens in exoplanets. So this plot shows the temperature on the x-axis and the pressure on the y-axis, and this is the temperature structure of a typical hot Jupiter. There is the lower atmosphere where there can be or cannot be a stratosphere here, for example, down here. And then there is this giant increase in temperature that can reach up to about 10,000 Kelvin at the thermobase. And then the temperature decreases again here due to adiabatic cooling because the atmosphere expands, and then there is the exosphere high up. And there are several processes that drive escape in exoplanetary atmospheres. Obviously, there is Jeans escape. That's the most common. And as Justin said before, there are particles that have Jeans that have a Maxwellian distribution, and this distribution has a tail, and particles that have a velocity that exceeds or is close to the escape velocity, and these particles lie above the exobase, then these particles can escape. But Jeans escape is definitely not important for closing planets. What matters most is definitely blow-off. And blow-off is a process for which high energy stellar radiation hits the planetary upper atmosphere and ionizes hydrogen. And this process of ionization heats up the atmosphere, as I said, up to, in hot Jupiters, up to about 10,000 Kelvin. And this temperature is so high that then the atmosphere expands hydrodynamically, and this is why then there is this adiabatic cooling in the upper atmosphere. And this is blow off. But there is also another process that is also extremely important, particularly young ages, that is called boil off. And this happens for planets that have a low mass and high temperature and a very extended atmosphere. Imagine you take the moon and you can magically attach a nitrogen atmosphere to the moon, and then again magically you release whatever keeps the atmosphere around the moon. And what happens is simply that the atmosphere just poof vanishes completely. And this is boil off. And it vanishes not because the sun emits high energy radiation, but simply because the moon doesn't have enough gravity to hold on the hydrogen. And then these are all thermal escape processes. And then there is a bunch of non-thermal escape processes that are the majority of the processes in the solar system, but they are almost negligible in terms of exoplanets. And this is simply because the vast majority of the planets that we know, they are a lot closer to their host stars, and therefore both blow-off and boil-off are the most important processes. So this plot shows the distribution of the planets that we know to date in terms of the incident stellar radiation that you see on the x-axis in units of what the Earth receives. And on the y-axis, you see the planetary radius. You see up here, there are the hot Jupiters. Down here, there are Neptunes, sub-Neptunes, and super-Earths. And there are very few planets at large distances, and this is because these are planets for which we have a measurement of the planetary radius, and therefore these planets are mostly transiting. And for that to happen, is more likely to happen for planets that are closer in. There are various features in this plot, and there are two in particular that are believed to be caused by atmospheric escape. And the first one is the subjovian desert, which is up here, which is this sort of triangle that has a lack of planets. And this is believed to be caused by actually a combination of planet migration and atmospheric escape. So planet migration is what drives the upper edge of the desert, and atmospheric escape is what drives the lower edge of the desert. And planets that have not enough mass and are too close in to the star to keep their hydrogen-dominated atmosphere, then the atmosphere just flies away to space and only the core is left. And this obviously depends on with the distance to the star, and that's why this void gets generated. And then there is another feature that is pretty recent, and it is called the radius gap. And if one looks very carefully in the sub-Neptune and super-Earth regime, one can see that there is essentially a gap around 1.8 Earth radii. And this gap, if one does the math, can be accounted to atmospheric escape. There are two very important things that are important to say. One is that the escape is observable mostly at UV wavelengths, and this is because of the low optical depth, typically low optical depth of tenuous upper atmospheres. And the second, it is also very important, is that most of the escape happens when planets are young, and in particular within the first 500 million years. And this is clear simply from looking at this plot. Most of the planets that are shown on this plot, they are older than a gigayear, and the fact that we see these features like the subjovian desert and the radius gap tells us that the escape has happened before at an age earlier compared to the age of these planets, and therefore most of the escape has already happened in the past. This is a pretty messy plot, and it is actually a summary of the results of direct observations of atmospheric escape on exoplanets. So the plot is the same as I have shown you before, but this time there are a few planets that are highlighted by red and blue dots. So the red corresponds to the core of the planet, and then the blue corresponds to the atmosphere. And there are two kinds of blue. There are planets that have a little blue, and there are planets that have a larger blue ring. And planets with larger blue rings means that their atmospheres are significantly larger. So how can we understand the picture that the observations actually show us? And these are mostly UV observations and UV transit observations. So there are planets that have very large envelopes, and these planets are typically, these envelopes are so large because these planets are either very hot, like in the case of WOSP-12b, or they have a low gravity, but still a large enough mass to be able to keep their atmosphere. So there are two planets here, GJ436b and GJ3470b, which have really giant corona around. They have giant hydrogen envelopes, and you have to imagine that in particular for GJ436b, the hydrogen envelope around these planets is a lot larger than their host stars. And then there are planets down here that do not show any hydrogen envelope. And this is either because they are too hot and they have lost completely their hydrogen atmosphere, and this is most likely the case of 55 Cancri, or they have a too low gravity to be able to keep their atmosphere, and this is most likely the case of the very small planets. But there are also other cases in which fast hydrogen ionization can happen because we probe hydrogen through detection of the Lyman alpha line in transit. And obviously this is neutral hydrogen. So if hydrogen gets ionized very quickly, then we can't see the transit in the Lyman alpha line. Or the atmosphere is too heavy. So maybe there is a mixture of hydrogen and heavy species like water and CO2. and this makes the atmosphere condense and smaller, and therefore maybe we are not able to see the hydrogen for this reason. So one thing that that is certainly interesting to do, particularly to understand planetary evolution, like trying to understand how these features in the exoplanet population happen and appear, is computing planetary atmospheric evolution. Now, there are two problems that we have to face when we try to do this. The first one is highlighted with the plot on the left-hand side. So the plot shows age on the x-axis and then high energy luminosity of stars on the y-axis. And one can see that when stars are young, the activity of these stars are very, very different. And here we use the, actually behind this plot, there are rotation rates of stars, which are used as proxy then to get to high energy emission. But what this plot is essentially telling you is that when stars are young, they are not all born as fast rotators. There are stars that are born as fast rotators. There are stars that are born as very slow rotators, and there are stars that are born with everything, any rotation in between. And this difference in rotation rate, in natal rotation rate, then is also reflected in the high energy emission that these stars have. And obviously, the fact that some stars are born as fast rotators, so very active and emit a lot of high energy emission, and some other stars are born as slow rotators and therefore already inactive as they are born, has a significant impact on the evolution of planets that are nearby. Now, there is one problem in this, and that the rotation evolutionary tracks of these stars, they all get together at about 1 to 2 gigayears. And this tells us that if we have a star that is older than 1 or 2 gigayears, there is no way for us to get back in time and get the information of how the star was when it was born, whether it was a fast rotator or a slow rotator to begin with. And therefore, it's very complicated for us to find out how which was the evolution of the atmosphere of the planet. This is the first problem. The second problem is instead more, let's say, more computational. So computing mass loss rates is extremely complicated in theory. It requires hydrodynamic simulations, and hydrodynamic simulations are very time consuming, and therefore it is not really possible to use them to do atmospheric evolution studies. So what most people do is to use an approximation, and the most used approximation is the energy limited approximation that is shown here. Now, recently we computed a large grid of models. I'm coming to this in the next slide. A large grid of hydrodynamic models, and compare the results, the mass loss rate that we get from the hydrodynamic models with the energy limited approximation. And there are very, very large differences that have, the differences are very large, are of several orders of magnitude. And therefore, it is not really possible to use the energy limited approximation to compute atmospheric evolution, or better, to reliably compute atmospheric evolution, accounting for escape. So which is the solution to both problems? Let's start first from finding the solution to the second problem. The solution to the second problem, which is the one that the hydrodynamic models take a long time to compute, is that we can pre-compute a large grid of hydrodynamic upper atmosphere models and then interpolate inside the grid to get the mass loss rate of any planet lying inside the grid. And this enables us, interpolating is very fast, and this enables us to get the mass loss rates very quickly and reliable mass loss rates very quickly for any planet inside the grid. The solution to the first problem I showed you is that we take that as a result of the simulation. So it works this way. So we take a series of of models. We essentially take an analytic formulation of how the high energy emitted by the star evolves with time. And in fact, this is actually evolutionary tracks for the rotation period of the star. And this is left as a free parameter. So essentially, it's modeled as a power law where the exponent is left. It is a broken power law where the exponent at ages before shorter than 2 gigayears is left as a free parameter. And then we have stellar evolutionary tracks that we use to track the temperature of the planet as the evolution goes. And then we have models that allow us to, a grid of models that allow us to combine, or better to relate the atmospheric mass fraction of a planet with the planetary radius, the planetary mass, and the equilibrium temperature of the planet. And then we have a large grid of upper atmosphere hydrodynamic models to get mass loss rates. And then we use these ingredients and we generate evolutionary tracks, and we generate millions of evolutionary tracks inside a Markov chain Monte Carlo and use Bayesian statistics then to take care of the uncertainties. So it works this way, and I have, there is a movie here that shows you how this works, but before, let me show you what each panel of the movie is then going to show you. So the red lines are the priors. And you see that we have a prior for the planetary mass, a prior for the age of the system, a prior for the current planetary, for the current stellar rotation rate. And then we have a flat prior for the initial atmospheric mass fraction of the planet, because one of the things that we do not know is how big was the planet when it was formed. And so how much atmosphere the planet had when it was formed. And then we have a prior for the stellar mass. And then we have also a flat prior for the initial rotation period of the star. And here we use as a proxy the rotation period of the star at an age of 150 million years. And in this plot, you see another dotted histogram, and this dotted histogram is the distribution of rotation rates observed in open clusters of an age of 150 million years. And in this plot, in this panel on the bottom and on the right side, you see just one line right now. This is only one evolutionary track for the planet, but then you will see many more appearing. And the little box that you see, this is the age of the system and the planetary radius. And these are the two things that we fit. Essentially, the algorithm generates millions of evolutionary tracks varying the different parameters, and then tries to find those that at the end fit the observed radius of the planet at the age of the system. So here it goes. Here are millions of evolutionary tracks that are produced, and I'm not showing all of them, otherwise it would just be completely black and red. Only a few are shown. And the lines in black are those that at the end do not end up inside the box, while the red ones are those that end up inside the box. And you see that the priors are then respected. And then there are posteriors that are appearing that are those in blue. And you see that there are two posteriors that come out of the flat priors, one on the initial atmospheric mass fraction and the other one on the rotation rate of the star when it was young. So the stellar rotation rate at young age is actually a result of the system. And this is the final, at the end of the simulation, and the green areas indicate the 68% credible interval. So essentially the 1 sigma uncertainty. Now, is this useful? Is this telling us something that is actually useful? And it does. Well, the information about the initial atmospheric mass fraction is certainly very useful for constraining planet formation, planetary atmospheric accretion models. But in this context, what's probably most interesting to you is that we can definitely constrain the evolutionary path of the rotation rate of the star. And here we have the case of HD 3167. And this is the the final rotation rate, the blue curve, the blue histogram, is the final distribution of the initial rotation rate. And here it is compared to the, then turned into high energy emission and compared to the spread that we observed that we observe in clusters. And it is definitely constraining of the actual rotation rate, of the actual initial rotation rate of the star. So we can say that HT 3167 was a pretty fast rotator when it was young. Now there is a spin-off of this work that brings us back to the solar system. So we thought we can do this with exoplanets and our stars. Maybe we can do this with the solar system and the sun as well. Now, the issue here is that in the solar system, we do not have hydrogen planets. And I mean, all the planets that we have that have an hydrogen-dominated atmosphere, they're all very, very far away. And but we have the Earth. And for the Earth, we know many, many things. And in particular, we know isotopic ratios. And we can use isotopic ratios and assume that the composition, the isotopic composition that we see in the Earth atmosphere, but also in Venus atmosphere, are due to atmospheric escape that happened in the early stages of
Luca?
Yes?
You have 2 minutes.
I'm almost done, yeah. So we have done essentially the same thing. So again, in a sort of Monte Carlo scheme, but a bit more simplified this time, and arrived at this conclusion. So this plot shows you the mass of the Earth and Venus in Earth masses when essentially the planets came out of the nebula. So the Earth was not done. Was just about 50 to 60% ready, while Venus was almost ready. But the other thing, the other interesting thing is that this chi-square map tells you which was most likely the rotation rate of the sun when it was young, and we know from this that now that that the sun when it was young was a rather slow rotator. So this is the take-home messages that I want to give you. The high energy stellar radiation induces atmospheric heating and an escape. Mass loss has a profound impact on the observed exoplanet population. And then the study of close-in planets can lead us to learn something fundamental also about stars that can be otherwise impossible to get from other measurements. And developments that are ongoing in the exoplanet field can actually trigger development also in our fields. And in this particular case, as I have shown you, for the understanding the formation of the inner solar system planet and of the early sun. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Luca. I always find it interesting when people use the effects of variability to derive the variability itself. We see that,
the case.
We see that with the solar spectrum, the radiant spectrum at Earth a lot, where people use the Earth atmosphere or planetary atmosphere and their models to say what the sun is doing, yeah, opposed to the other way around. Are there any questions in the chat for Luca? I'm not seeing any right now. I hope you can join us in the breakout room for this session and have more discussion of your talk. We're running about 5-10 minutes behind, so I'm going to